So welcome to Cloughjordan Ecovillage. I'm here today with Sean O Farrell. My name's Majella O'Connor, and we're going to talk a little bit about enhancing biodiversity within our hedgerow here along the boundary walk in Cloughjordan.
Yeah, good morning, Majella. How are you?
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. I'm great. So hedgerows, I'm very fond of hedgerows as a habitat, but I could easily fall into a trap that I think we as humans regularly make. We tend to compartmentalise. We talk about a hedgerow, we talk about a woodland, we talk about a pond and whatever else. Whereas, as John Moore said, you can't just tug at, if you tug at anything in nature, you'll find that everything is connected. So I think we've got to keep that in mind. And also as we stand here by this fine hedgerow, just to maybe engage in the moment and use our senses, our sense of smell and our sense of smell of the lovely flowers in a few moments, and to listen to the rooks in the background, and we'll, I'm sure, meet lots of other birds as we go around. So I think it's important to engage fully in the experience and really connect. I think it's important, that it is important for people out in recreation, walking along this pathway, or for farmers that are out to look after their horses or animals or whatever, that they connect with the surrounding and not just march on and not take notice. So paying attention is always good.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And of course here we have a fabulous hawthorn behind you here.
Absolutely. It's just one of the trees that I actually know the Latin name for. So it's Crataegus monogyna. So after that, don't ask me any other Latin names. It's really now. Another name for it is the May bush, and maybe you can see why, because it's a beautiful blossoms on it now at the moment. And each of those blossoms, of course, is depending on a pollinator to pollinate it. Later in the year, the haws will emerge on this beautiful tree. And that's so again, as I say, it's not just a localized thing. It's actually a global thing, in terms of those haws then are going to be the food source for some, not just your local birds, but birds that fly in from Scandinavia, like the redwing and the fieldfare. So the hedgerow in Cloughjordan has international connections, which is very interesting, and it's a nice way to see it that way. So yes, the flowers, food source for so many pollinating insects, hoverflies and butterflies, and loads of other little flies as well. So and I think actually the hawthorn has about 80 different moth species associated with it, and shield bugs and loads of other little creatures. That if we were to actually get a little sheet or a tray or something and hold it underneath the branch of the hawthorn tree and give it a bit of a beating or a shake, you'd be amazed the amount of spiders and beetles and bugs that fall into that. And of course, that's the bounty for the other creatures to come along then and find, like, you know.
Fabulous. Let's take a little stroll along.
Lovely.
And I see there's some undergrowth then growing in places. Is this the A-frame that they'd be talking about now, with the farmers encouraging the A-frame? Yes,
Majella, they encourage an A-shaped hedge, and I suppose in a way they encourage the farmer to let the hawthorn or the blackthorn or whatever tree species, to let it go to maturity, where it can flower and produce those berries and food source for other creatures. But then also it's nice to have a bit of space for the ground flora and the different levels. You might have brambles and honeysuckle and other ones that kind of at the different layers, and then you're going to have some ground flora along here, like the early flowers like the primroses and the celandines and lots of other the dandelions and lots of others. So that's the benefit of having that you're capturing as much sunlight and that as you can.
Great. So I noticed a bit of a gap here in this, and it looks like somebody has pushed some of the hedge down. Is that the hedge laying that we were talking about there?
Yes, that's a good example of hedge laying, and it is important Well, it's no harm to have a little bit of a gap in a hedgerow, but if you want to, for stock proofing, you could take a nice mature stem, maybe the thickness of the handle of a shovel, or maybe you might be able to manage a stake size thickness, let's say. And in order to bring that down, you would need to cut it at an angle, about 3/4 ways through. Leave a nice strong hinge and gradually work it over onto the horizontal. You might use some tools to gradually get it down, and you might need to tie it down maybe, or put a sod or a rock or something on just to keep it down. And the interesting thing about it is then it shoves up the vertical shoots again, and it fills up that gap. So, but that's a very worthwhile thing to do. But in a hedgerow, I think it's also important to say that it's good to have structural diversity as well as species diversity. So it's good to have a high trees growing up. It's good to have lower vegetation at lower levels down also, because structural diversity, like for example, the song thrush likes to sing high up in a tree, the blackbird fairly high up, the robin and the wren would be at lower tiers in the hedgerow. So that's why structural diversity is important.
And we're hearing a lot of the birds as we're walking along here.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure if we were up a couple of hours ago, the chorus would be even stronger.
Okay, so we've just walked down along by Cloughjordan Community Farm there, and we've come up to this south-facing hedgerow here. This is really mature hedge here. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the history behind the hedgerows in Ireland, Sean, or where did this come from, and why is there such diversity here?
Yes, first of all, it's a beautiful hedgerow, and I really like it because of the mix and the native trees and so forth. And those native trees would have been typical examples of the native woodlands that would have covered the majority of Ireland back in medieval times or even further back. And then, of course, they were cleared for farming. And farming in the earlier stages was probably pretty much open territory. But for better management of the farming and of the livestock and crops, it was decided that you know what, we need to put in divisions, control our animals where we need them, and protect our crops and so forth. So they decided to put in hedgerows. And I suppose in a way then, so I'm talking roughly now about the 16th century, thereabouts.
Okay, so quite long.
Yes, quite, yeah, absolutely. And this was coming from laws by the British government. And I suppose that the main land enclosure acts were about this in the 1700s. So that's when you really seen a lot of activity around building up the earthen banks and putting in the native tree species. But many times when we walk along these hedgerows, we forget about all that human impact and positive human impact in terms of the physical work of digging up and creating that bank and then going along and planting those trees. So you had no mechanical ways of doing things. So that's an interesting one. And then also, different localities around the country had different ways, because I see back up in my own part in Tumivara Parish and up around Cloncannon, not only would they dig and create a bank and plant the hedgerows, but they might even put on stone facing on it as well. So there's a huge amount of work in that, and a huge amount of work in terms of breaking the stone and carting the stone and applying it. And just when you mentioned the willow then, you know, they're probably using donkeys to cart the material, and they might even have been using willow to make the baskets or whatever. So willow is a fantastic one of our native trees. So in terms of history, first of all, it was if you've heard Brian Boru harp, the Brian Boru harp was originally made from the willow tree. Then, as I mentioned, basketry, used also in construction. So we had a great connection with willow over time. It likes to grow in wetter places, damper ground, or maybe by rivers or whatever, like the alder. It's of enormous value to biodiversity because it's one of the first trees to produce nectar in the springtime. And for the emergent bumblebees and hoverflies and all those guys, it's that early food source to get them started and creating their nests and so on. Okay, and not only the bumblebees and hoverflies, but they reckon that over 400 different species and insects and creatures
Amazing.
feed on the willow tree.
Fabulous. So let alone for the biodiversity, you're giving us so much reasons to keep our hedgerows there, for the heritage value, for the biodiversity value, for so many other reasons as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose in a way you might say, well, Sean, is there management in relation to the willow? Do you know what a nice thing about the willow is? You know, you can coppice it and it'll sprout up new sprouts again. So in that way, you have older parts of the tree and you have new fresh vegetation coming, and that's again expanding the biodiversity value by having that diversity, of structure. This one here then is just about to come into flower at the moment. The elder. I have a kind of a graw for the elder because it tends to get hammered in hedgerows by the flail machine. Oh. And it is a soft wood. It's brittle, and it can get disease and fungus then from that kind of management. It's very important for wildlife because, as you can see, there's a good flower head coming onto it. Lots of hoverflies and bees and even butterflies like to get the pollen from that. It then produces a kind of a big, you could say almost a nest, or certainly double handful of black shiny berries that are very popular with many different birds and stuff. So it's really, and of course you might know that the elderberry is used for elderberry wine or elderberry cordial or whatever. So immune booster in the winter. Yes,
for
indeed.
Herbalists will use,
Absolutely.
And I think even the flowers some herbalists will use for hay fever in
the
excellent. Springtime. Yeah,
wow,
it's
wow.
like make a tea out of it.
Brilliant, excellent.
I mean, some of this is grown so tall. Is that okay to keep it growing that tall now, Sean, or would you know the way a lot of people had cut them back? We don't need, I suppose, the farm. It's not overlooking the crops or anything.
It's providing shelter for animals. It's providing, as I mentioned earlier, you know, that particular one there that's high there that we're looking at there. It could be on a daily basis used by a blackbird or a song thrush to greet the morning and say, this is my spot here, my territory. So I think it's important to have them, and even if that should grow old and some of it becomes dead, you know, deadwood is also very important for the beetles and the centipedes and millipedes and all those guys that will recycle the nutrients and provide energy for the next crop.
And of course we need all that as well.
Yeah.
So leave them grow high.
Leave them grow high, but you know, you could, as we mentioned earlier, you could coppice some, like you could do with the willow, or lay down appropriate stems. Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. And as we're walking along, we're noticing little paths in here. Would they be kind of rabbits or foxes or?
Yes, you're bound to get, as we look at it, it does provide great, you see, hedgerows are a corridor for creatures to move along through the landscape. They want to pretty much stay out of connection, stay away from connection with humans, but also, you know, the predator-prey dynamics. They want to avoid getting eaten, of course, and if they can sneak up on something else, well and good. So that's the beauty of them. And as you mentioned there, you got high grass and actually not just for the fox or the badger, but the high grass is going to be a nice place for the likes of the shrew or the field mouse to hide in around the grasses. And then you might look up and you might see the kestrel hovering overhead, and he's trying to track them through this. So there's that web of life. Absolutely, and as you say, you have a nice bit of ground vegetation. You have vetches there as well, and you know, they're going to attract. I find I love to leave the vetches around my garden or outside my house. Those lovely, yes, indeed, absolutely, they're brilliant. The bumblebees love those, and I do my utmost to leave them around the house, like, you know.
That was World Bee Day during the week.
Yes, indeed, absolutely, absolutely. So yes, that's the blackthorn there, and you can. It's usually has kind of a darker color and a kind of shiny type of a stem on it. Fairly severe thorns. Certainly good to as a stock-proof plant in a hedgerow to keep back the animals. One issue with it maybe, and maybe you might find here in time, that it's actually going to be suckering out into the field.
Okay.
And you might find that well, you know what, we better go with the loppers and cut back a few of these guys and just so that.
So that's one you might want to manage more than the others. Leave the others go, but maybe that's a more managed
I
one.
think so to a certain extent, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because it's going to stay encroaching out, and you do need to maybe manage it a little bit. All right, yeah. Again, interesting thing about the blackthorn is you can see it's in leaf here now at the moment on the 22nd of May, but it actually produces its flowers before it produces its leaf, which is quite interesting because the way I would have thought about it in my head, that it would be needing the energy from the sun onto its leaves to then produce the flowers, which is what most of them do. But somehow this guy is able to produce the energy to produce the flowers first.
Okay,
like, which
so
is,
the opposite to the hot.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Interesting. And then of course the flowers are the fruit is the sloe.
Oh, okay.
Again, liked by many birds like the blackbird and maybe even pigeons and all of those. And they are not able to digest the little stone in the inside, and like with many of the fruit that it's in the hedgerow, it gets transported by the bird and dropped somewhere else, and off goes anew. So there's mutual benefits between the plant and the animal.
And of course we can make some slow gin
Absolutely,
for Christmas.
absolutely, spot on. Keep the spirits up. There's a beautiful holly. Absolutely, and one of our evergreens. And again, in terms of cultural history and so forth, we have a tradition of bringing it in decoration in the house around Christmas time. And some people would say that there's an association between the thorns and the crown of thorns that our Lord was made to wear, and also the berries, the red berries, and the blood of our Lord. So this is cultural heritage and folklore. Interesting thing about it though is it's amazing evolutionary strategy that as we look at it there, it has very prickly, thorny leaves lower down, whereas the ones higher up look much more rounded and way less thorny. So it's amazing how the intellect or the evolutionary instinct of the plant conserves its energy and just uses those thorns where it needs those thorns, which is at grazing level,
Yeah.
So that's quite amazing. The wood of the holly would be favoured by wood turners.
Okay.
Yeah, really good for making different implements over bowls and different things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, there's so much more than just biodiversity. It's the usefulness, the heritage, the...
Absolutely. And it's nice to keep a connection with that folklore connection and as you mentioned earlier, even the medicinal side of things.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
And we see a lot of nettles as well.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't like the nettles. So I'd say you'd have something to say about them, Sean, wouldn't you?
Well, I actually haven't had my spring tonic of nettle this year, and it's pushing on for that now because they maintain you should get the early shoots of nettles for your spring tonic. They contain lots of iron, I believe, and builds the immunity. What better time than now to be doing that? Yes, but also, some people are going to be going out and using sprays and things and trying to get rid of their nettles. It's such a pity because they are so important for many. It's the food plant for so many different creatures, several different butterflies, and I'm sure many moths and stuff as well. Like the small tortoiseshell and the peacock and others used it as a food plant, and the caterpillars then will feed on them. You know what I mean? So they are very important. And even I see in my garden, if there's nettles growing in the garden, and if you dig up a nettle, I often notice there's certainly going to be earthworms underneath them. So there's that underground diversity that's connecting with the above ground diversity, and
which of course is going to help then the land
absolutely
and the crops and whatever is
absolutely.
grown on
I
the
think
land,
it's very important that we kind of understand more that above ground, below
Yes.
ground diversity, relationships,
And the web
earthworms
and-
and
yeah,
fungi and the
absolutely.
web, as you say. Absolutely. Okay, so I just noticed the spindle here. To be honest, it was a native tree I didn't get to know until relatively recent, and what attracted me was its colours.
Fabulous colours, isn't it? In the autumn?
Fabulous colours at different times of the year. Lovely flowers, kind of whitish flowers, and then those flowers, the fruit are amazing coloured fruit. I gather you are familiar with them. Some people would refer to them as being almost like shaped like a bishop's hat.
Oh, okay,
I heard
yeah.
them described as being shaped like a bishop's hat. But they have a kind of a pink, and the inner core of the fruit is kind of orange. It was quite amazing. Then later in the autumn, they have beautiful colours in the autumn. They're quite early to turn kind of reddish and orange, and they really add a lovely colour to the landscape. So that's what really attracts me about them. Another thing I have noticed and I have been amazed about them is that they're the food plant. The spindle is the food plant of the ermine moth.
Oh,
And I have seen spindle trees, you could say almost overwhelmed with caterpillars enclosed in little webs. And you'd wonder how, in the name of God, could that tree recover from that? And you know what? It does.
okay.
It's amazing.
So
It's
maybe
amazing.
it's some symbiosis between them,
Absolutely.
something going on that's helping each
Absolutely.
other.
There's a
yeah.
mutual benefit probably
Yeah.
somewhere along the way. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so another interesting thing about the spindle and its cultural connections was the wood was a kind of tended to be straight and fairly strong, and the spindles were used by people that were used in weaving and that industry, let's say, you know what I mean? Spinning and weaving. Now these guys are still here.
You brought some of your friends along with you today.
They're fairly tame. Indeed, I did. Yes. They're brilliant for educational purposes. Yeah, it's often difficult to get up close to a badger and to see the real structural shape and how it's designed to be successful in nature. And so if I am using it with school groups or other farmers on my own farm, we talk about how it is adapted and its structural adaptations, and you see the fine claws it has there. It can be used for digging its set, CTT, which is its home, or it might be used to fight another badger to control its territory. And then of course its nose is going to be very important for smell, and it has got really powerful jaws. And it's, of course, as you will know, it's a nocturnal creature, so that's why its colours are so important to it. And it's got a big overcoat of nice fur to keep it warm in the winter time.
I always remember as a child being told if you ever get a badger attack your leg, you have to get a stick and break it. Is that true now?
Well, I've heard that so many times, because they have so much power in those jaws that if they did, they probably thought they had their leg broke maybe, and they could go for the second bite then maybe, and you might get a chance to run away. But yes, but for the farming community, I suppose they're not the most favoured animal, because they're accused of carrying TB.
Okay.
But to be honest, I have my own different thoughts on that. In that, I believe myself that you know what, if like in a hedgerow you have loads of diversity, and even out in the farm you have dung beetles and you're not using dosing equipment and stuff on the animals, the dung beetles can be a food source for the badger. And these things will actually build up the immunity of the badger. Like we trying to build up our own immunity by taking the cordials or whatever. If there's a good habitat and a good rich diversity, maybe the badger is immune to TB then as well. So we got to see the bigger picture, like, you know.
Okay. And who's this little fella?
This one then is not so polite as you might think. He looks very cute, but if you have a flock of chickens, or I heard you mention hens earlier, well, you know what, he can take the life out of them fairly quickly. That's a pine marten. In Irish, it's called uncut cream, the tree cat. Again, like the badger, it's evolved to have quite a wide dietary choice, let's say. So it's an omnivore too, like the badger. It will eat mice and shrews, and it will. I've actually seen it at home, my own farm, jumping through the branches along a hedgerow.
Like a squirrel almost.
Yeah, moving along, probably checking for birds' nests and eggs and stuff.
Okay.
So it was like a monkey going through the hedge. so amazing indeed. And of course, again, it's a structural. It's adapted for that. Like it's got the tail for the balance, and it's sleek and it's agile, you know. And you can see again those little claws for grabbing on. And so that's the pine marten.
Great.
Yep.
So we might leave our friends there for a while and we continue along this way a little bit.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have. I noticed a crab apple there. Yes, it's a crab there. And you know what? I love to see crabs in a hedgerow because they are one of the 7 nobles of the wood, as they were called.
Okay.
Yeah, and those nobles were the apple, the ash, the hazel, the holly, the oak, the pine, and the yew.
Okay.
Yeah, those were the 7 nobles of the wood. So it's great to see that. You know what? We met the badger and the pine marten. Those guys would also feed on the fruit of that. And as you can see now, the 5 petals, the rose flower, you could say, on the apple, excellent for the pollinators. Absolutely. Brilliant.
And I see the brambles coming in there.
The brambles, yes, indeed. And again, you could have a debate about brambles, because there's I know a researcher or naturalist, Declan Dukes, maintained there could be 200 different species of brambles, so they probably hybridise, but they are excellent for wildlife. Again, mentioned the badger and pine marten, they would eat the blackberries later in the year also, and the flowers. And the interesting thing about the flowers and the fruit, they flower for quite a long period of time. So that they support a lot of different pollinators, and the fruit emerges over a long period of time. They don't all go black over a 2-week period, but they're gradually going into being the blackberry stage over quite a number of weeks. Yeah. So that's prolonging the food source, like, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Fabulous.
Majella, just look up there. You see another noble of the wood there. That's the hazel.
Oh yes.
Of course, we have a huge cultural connection with the hazel, because our ancestors, even hunter-gatherers, you know, they depended so much on the hazel for the hazelnut for their protein. They would probably use those lovely straight stems maybe to make a spear or whatever for hunting. But then also, taking that the wood is quite straight and flexible, they would have used it for their upright stakes and also for their horizontal stakes to make their fencing, to keep their animals in their enclosure, or maybe even for their own structure of their own huts or houses as well. So it had a huge value for humans. And of course, squirrels are going to enjoy the fruit, the hazelnut. And it's a tree that, you know, you could coppice. You know, you could coppice a certain amount of it, just coppice a little bit. And that means cut it right low down to the ground, and it'll shove up new shoots again. And as I say, you have older vegetation then, and you have younger vegetation coming along. And for that reason, some of those hazels could go on to live for up to 300 years, like, you know what I mean? Because by a little bit of coppicing and that type of thing, yeah.
To end here, I think we're going to end with our fabulous tree here that we're all so fond of.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. It's a great specimen to finish with. The elder. By God, it's rare to find an elder stands so well and not get knocked over by the wind. But I suppose where we are here, Majella, it's sheltered a bit.
Well, the hedgerow, I suppose, is
Hedgerow,
kept high.
absolutely, and I see some beech over in the distance, probably providing a little bit of shelter, because it is prone a little bit to getting knocked over by wind. But you can see that kind of corky, deep crevices on the bark. And I also noticed over here, you know, some of the older stuff having little holes in it. Invaluable for insects that want to hibernate during the winter time or whatever. Like so it's got a huge wildlife value. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, you're going to have older pieces maybe falling down and providing the food source for the beetles and centipedes and millipedes and even snails and slugs and all these creatures. Like so, they're all contributing to the orchestra of life along that hedgerow. So it's great to see. And even along it, on the bark, I can see some lichen or some lichens also. Like so, it's and even some mosses growing on up there. So there's a lot. And I didn't mention and we could go on and on. I didn't mention the ivy.
Sure.
Another great strategy in the way that it has this climbing ability to climb up along that tree, and then when it gets to where it can reach the sunlight, it changes its growth form, and it no longer needs to have that climbing growth form, but it opens out into a branched growth form, which is...
So it's not necessarily harming the tree here.
Not necessarily harming the tree, just using it for climbing.
Okay.
Absolutely. It is well rooted in the ground underneath, but it's quite an amazing evolutionary strategy for climbing too. And then it changes its growth form, as I say. And
there's some interesting flowers underneath here.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. And that's called, there's a number of different names for it, but it's called Arum, A-R-U-M, or Lords and Ladies is another quite common name for it. And the interesting thing about it is, looking at it there now at the moment, it's very soon it'll be giving off a kind of a scent or a smell like cow poo. Okay, and the purpose of that is to attract insects down into the core, into the funnel and into the core, where there's hairs, downward pointing hairs, and they don't allow the insects to come back out until the insect has actually managed to pollinate the flower. Okay. And then the insects are released the next day.
Okay, so they kind of stay in there for a little bit.
Absolutely.
Take a little dance around
and get a little bit of nectar and get a bit of nectar, and off they go again. Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, that symbiotic relationship or mutual benefit.
And the cleavers beside.
The cleavers, absolutely. Another example of you know, great adaptation. That's four-stemmed plant that has little hooks along its stem, and it's again able to climb across other plants.
Fabulous. So much in just one small area.
So
much just in that one underneath.
Absolutely.
Elder is kind of almost protecting or almost
absolutely
sheltering all these.
Now you said it, and that's why, as I mentioned earlier, the bit of shade and the different levels of shade and different levels of light, that's going to affect the different levels of moisture and so on and so forth to suit the different plants. Like, you know what I mean? And so it is quite a dynamic interconnectivity happening there.
So it's been fabulous.
Absolutely.
And thanks so much, Sean, for this.
Majella,
it's been
my pleasure.
Wonderful.
My pleasure. Well done to yourselves, and I hope you enjoy it for many times to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.